Нил Jacobstein с лекцией «Технический, деловой и этический смысл искусственного интеллекта и робототехники». Ваши аплодисменты.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to share my passion for exponential technologies with you today. If you look at the Earth from space, you don't see 200 plus separate countries. And when you look at nature deeply, you don't see separate disciplines. And that's why it's important for all of us, whether at the university or in industry or in government, to be unapologetically interdisciplinary. Not because it's fashionable or because the faculty took a vote, but because that's the way nature is. All of us are surfing in front of a tsunami wave of data and information. 1.8 zettabytes, or 10 to the 21st bytes of information. And turn it down, please, thank you. And we have a problem. We have all got an ancient information processing architecture to work with. In fact, this information processing architecture hasn't had an upgrade for over 50,000 years. Now, if your laptop or your cell phone hadn't had an upgrade in 50, call it 5 years, you would be very concerned about that. So we have an ancient information processing architecture with very well-known limitations of bandwidth, processing speed, and it also has bugs in the cognition that are built in, like saliency, the tendency to exaggerate things that are very salient, like dropping out of the sky at 35,000 feet. People are worried about that, and they don't worry about going to their neighborhood grocery store in their car, which is really a more dangerous trip than most flying expeditions. So we have this very ancient information processing architecture, and it's in need of augmentation. We have a saying at Singularity University that AI is easy and AV is hard. So AI has been augmenting human intelligence for quite a while. Let's take some examples. I'm going to have to go through these very quickly. If you're interested, just catch me after the Q&A session, and we can talk about any one of these applications. AI has been used in air traffic control. I flew in here last night depending on AI for my safety. AIs are used in the cockpit. They're also used in the air traffic control tower, and up until recently, largely in administrative tasks. But in the US, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, has been sponsoring a next generation project called the Generalized Information Learning Architecture. And that system, GILA system, is designed to look over the shoulder of air traffic controllers and emulate their problem-solving behavior for deconflicting the airspace. Why is that important? Because we're about to have huge numbers of UAVs in the skies, not just piloted aircraft. So the skies are going to become very crowded. AIs have been used in the service bays of automotive dealerships and repair shops. GM, Ford, Toyota, Mercedes, all of these companies use AI to do diagnosis and repair plans. We also have AI in use in medicine. First uses were about 35 to 40 years ago. AIs have been knocking on the front door of medicine for quite a while, for several decades. But it's just recently, in the US at least, that AIs have come in through the back door of medicine, through the electronic medical records clinical decision support system. And that system is going to be used throughout medicine and will become increasingly less of an option and more of something that's mandatory for doctors to use. We also have now a X Prize Qualcomm tricorder 10 million prize for the first team that comes up with a portable digital device like a cell phone or a PDA that can outperform a team of 10 board-certified physicians in the field doing diagnosis and some therapy recommendation. There are already 230 teams that are competing for this Qualcomm X Prize. Anybody recognize this? Mycoplasma laboratorium, Greg Bender's synthetic bacteria, the world's first synthetic bacteria announced in 2010. The people who put this together, put it together using synthetic biology techniques. But those very same techniques came right out of the AI community. Constraint satisfaction techniques, problem-solving techniques that are now built into the fabric of everyday life. And here we have a system called VIDES that was built by British Petroleum to identify microfossils that are associated with oil deposits in the ocean. This system has saved BP tens of millions of dollars because it does what experts have difficulty doing. This is a website called Cable, a really interesting website. Its CEO is a colleague of mine at Singularity University, Jeremy Howard. And this system hosts data science competitions, predictive analytics competitions around big problems. So people put up prize money for teams to compete using AI techniques. Sometimes people call them statistical or machine learning techniques to solve these problems. Let me give you an example. The Heritage Health Prize is $1 million prize for the team that can best predict which patients will end up in a hospital over the next year based on their clinical health practices. And in the US, for those people who don't have super complex tax forms to fill out at the state or federal level, they can use an AI in a box here, an expert tax advisor in a box called TurboTax. Very cheap, and it basically has become the standard for people who have simple tax forms to produce. AI has been part of the competitive edge of games all over the world, whether it's Halo, the Halo franchise of games, which some of you are familiar with, shoot 'em up games, or SOCOM. There's a whole series of games. Some of them are first-person shoot 'em ups with AI adversaries, sort of military games. And yet we can be more creative than that and have games that are about solving problems. Like this game is Red Redemption's Fate of the World, where it puts you in the driver's seat of a world in crisis, a world with pandemic disease, a world with poverty, a world where you are controlling the resources and you have to respond to war and famine and all kinds of interesting problems. This system was a sequel to the Green Climate Award game called BBC Climate Challenge that was played by over 1 million people. So if you're interested in AI and games, there's a big future for you. Let's take an example from the US. How many of you are familiar with Jeopardy? It's played in the US? Ah, okay, so most of you maybe not. This is a game that intellectuals who don't like watching TVs actually watch, because it's a game in which knowledge is tested of these contestants. And the way it's done is that the game provides an answer, and then the contestants have to come up with a question associated with that answer. So the answer may be, what is Moscow? And the question may be, what's the capital of Russia? So you could go further and look at what this game has produced. These two guys are the world champions in Jeopardy. And they have competed against all of the available competition and won. They are really, really smart people. Just last year, Watson from IBM beat these two in Jeopardy. Jeopardy requires a knowledge of humor and a knowledge of the ability to understand nuance and subtlety. It's really an amazingly difficult game. And the Watson system was not connected to the internet at the time that it was playing this game. It had already done its homework. Let's take a look at what it's like when you're playing against an AI. These two guys, remember, are the world champions. And they didn't lose by a little bit. They lost by a factor of 3. Let's take a look. Let's look at movie 1. Turn up the sound.
Kenny, you're in the first position. Please make a selection.
I've never said this on TV. Chicks dig me for 200, please.
Kathleen Kenyon's excavation of this city, mentioned in Joshua, showed the walls had been repaired 17 times. Watson.
What is Jericho?
Correct.
400, same category.
This mystery author and her archaeologist hubby dug in hopes of finding the lost Syrian city of Urkesh. Watson.
Who is Agatha Christie?
Correct. Watson.
Who is Mary Leakey?
You're right. Watson.
What is Crete?
Yes.
Let's finish Chick's degree.
Emma.
So Watson is very quick on the draw, and these guys were playing against it, learned that they were really up against formidable competition. Let's look under Watson's skull. What would we see? 2,880 processors, core processors, in 90 IBM 750 servers. That's serious hardware, for those of you who are not deeply into computing. The system had 16 terabytes of data and 80 teraflops of processing power, 80 trillion logical operations per second. And that's just the beginning. That's going to double every 18 months. So the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency in the US produced a system called the Cognitive Assistant that Learns and Organizes. It was the largest AI project in history. It had over a dozen teams that were cooperating mostly and competing a little bit. And the objective was to provide an assistant to a commander in the field. And the system succeeded so wildly that they decided to commercialize the system, and they spun it out of SRI in Menlo Park, near where I live. And they created a company that was bought out 9 months after they launched their startup. You may have heard of Siri. That was the company that was launched and was bought out by Apple 9 months after they started. How many of you are familiar with Siri? I'm not sure if you have it here.
Yes.
Do you have it here?
Yes.
Good. In some countries, it's not yet permitted, but I'm glad it is here. And you may know that Siri makes a lot of dumb mistakes.
Yes.
Really dumb mistakes. We have websites devoted to Siri's dumb mistakes. But I have to tell you that what you're seeing in Siri right now is just the beginning. It's just the tip of the iceberg of what that system can do. And part of Apple's challenge is to make sure when they release a more powerful system that their users they haven't given their users so much rope that they can hang themselves with them. So they have to be careful about what they release.